Hey there. Welcome back. We're your hosts, Alexandra.
And Christine.
How often do we say yes when we really want to say is no? Whether it's out of guilt, obligation, or fear of disappointing others, we've all been there. But what if saying no wasn't something we had to justify? What if it was simply an act of self respect? In this episode of the Mirror Project, we're diving into the power of saying no, why it's not always personal, how to handle the discomfort of setting boundaries, and ways to practice the skill in everyday life. We'll talk about prioritizing yourself without feeling guilty and share some practical takeaways to help you embrace the strength of a well placed no. So, let's get into it. No apologies necessary. Before we delve into today's riveting topic, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, or follow button on your favorite listening platform. Take a moment to do it now before it slips your mind. Trust us, we're not getting started without you. Let's make this journey together. So, Christine, we're
Yes.
jumping in. No
Mm-hmm.
apologies necessary. What
Oh,
started this
goodness.
conversation?
Well, like many things, we see something that sparks something for us, and we either share it with the other, or and it just devolves from there. But I'm not quite sure who found this, but one of us came across a quote by Paul Scanlon, and it says, "Let's normalize saying no to things without always needing to explain yourself or apologize." What must that be like? I have no idea.
Yeah, I hit that and I was like, oh. I was like, that seems like it would be so freeing, but also there's this
Right?
initial reaction of, no, I can't do that.
I know. Why do we feel that way? Any
Hmm.
ideas?
What is
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Why do we feel that way?
Well, I don't it's a good question. I was thinking about this, and before we started, I posed the question of is I know this is not just a me thing. A lot of people struggle with this. Is it something I also find that it's something that women particularly struggle with a lot more perhaps than men. I could be wrong. I don't know. That's just maybe a generalization of things, but I know in particular I struggle with this because I never want to disappoint somebody.
Mm,
I think I've mentioned this on many occasions before in past episodes, but I often put others before myself in a lot of different ways. But mostly, I it's hard to say no because I don't want to let someone down, I
hmm.
think.
Makes me wonder if it's especially hard for people who would identify themselves as people pleasers, you know,
Yeah.
because
Sure.
that no could be somebody else needs me, somebody else needs something. And like you said, where you put yourself last in many situations, to say
Right.
no is putting yourself first can be very
Right.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, I also feel like sometimes it's easier to say yes.
Mhm.
If you're up against a particularly strong personality
Ooh, yeah.
and you don't want it to devolve into an argument or anything, like sometimes I'll just say yes because it's easier. And even though, and I'll be honest, I have grown and I'm strong enough to say no when I definitely don't want to do something.
Hmm.
But of course, and everybody does stuff that they don't always want to do. But
Yeah.
there are instances where it's just easier sometimes, like
Yeah.
having, because I struggle with having to give an explanation, but you don't need to. But for
Yeah.
some reason, I don't know, I think women have been conditioned to have to give a reason or like,
Yeah. Almost like giving a reason or an explanation will soften the no,
yeah,
which then brings up a whole conversation of you think about in terms of dating. If you see stuff online about, men thinking like no doesn't mean no, it's like how much can like this aspect of like feeling like you have to just justify a no play into that, like kind of feed that view. Not that we are responsible for how other people view things, but that just saying like the inability to just say no, period, does that
yeah.
impact how other people receive our no. Oh, it's a soft no, or it's like a no, but with other explanations versus this is a hardcore no for whatever it is.
Hmm. Saying no is setting a boundary. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's like drawing a line in the sand. It's almost like we have to either apologize or explain why we have the boundaries we have, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
boundaries don't need an explanation. They're there to protect me and you. This is boundaries aren't bad. They're really good.
Yeah. Which is interesting. Have you ever felt like you've set a boundary and you feel like you might be in the wrong or feel like it's bad to have set that boundary?
Yeah, I have. I also feel like I haven't fully understood what boundaries meant until I got older.
Mm.
I mean, like, when things are clearly black and white when it comes to setting boundaries, I understood that. But there's been situations in my life in the last 5 years where they weren't so black and white, you know? And it's dealing with guilt or that uncomfortable feeling of you feel like you're wrong, but you're not wrong. You're doing what you
Mm.
need to do to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to put that feeling when it happens, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How do you resolve that? How do you
There's
become
the
okay
million
with
dollar
that?
question.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable sharing any of those stories or experiences where you felt like it wasn't so clear?
Well, in particular, you know, it was like it's family related. There's been things that have gone down with, you know, extended family over the years, and as I've said before, I'm a fiercely loyal person and I love my family. So there was a lot I had to sort of untwine from that. Not to say that these family members in particular were people I was very close with, but you know, it's struggling with the idea of what I hoped relationships to be and what they actually were. And
Mm.
so that was something I had to come to terms with, and then realizing it's okay and actually necessary to say to say no or set the boundaries I need to just sort of like at times it got to the point of to just function day to day, to not have a crippling fear that something was going to blow up, you know?
Mm-hmm. Because
But,
you know.
right,
Okay.
right.
Interesting.
I'm sure if I took a moment to dig deep, I could maybe think about instances where I was made to feel bad about saying no or
Mm-hmm.
not going along with what people wanted me to. You know, I'm a pretty laid back person, as you know, and I like to go with the flow. I like to see where things go and what happens, but I think it also comes down to, do you feel safe? And if you don't feel safe, saying no is pretty imperative.
Mm-hmm.
um, but how about you? I mean, has there been any particular instance where you said yes, but you really wanted to say no? And
I mean, yeah, I think kind of recently I had said yes to a situation, hanging out with somebody who I wanted to hang out with, and then it changed into more than just that friend, and I didn't really want to, but I did, and then the night before I was just like, I really don't want to do this because I felt like I said yes when I should have said no. And I had that internal debate that you were talking about earlier of, well, it's really not that bad. And, we all do things we don't really feel comfortable or like all the time. But then I realize now I'm like maybe doing myself a disservice. Looking back on that, I'm like, it kind of was a good thing I went in the sense of it really reaffirmed the importance of setting some boundaries
mm-hmm,
and the friendships I want in my life and stuff. So it was helpful in that sense, and it was very low risk. There wasn't
sure.
ever going to be a huge blowback or fallout had I said no or from going. But it was definitely a time in a very small moment where I could have prioritized myself and my boundaries and say
Sure.
no, and I did not. Yeah, I think we've talked about in the last episode or a few episodes where like I don't sometimes know where my boundaries are, but I do
Mm,
know as soon as somebody's crossed them, and some
yeah.
it can take people. quite long to get to that boundary, and then it seems out of the blue to them that I suddenly have this really firm boundary, and I'm like, no, yeah, I really should have communicated better where that boundary was to begin with, but I didn't really know until you crossed it, and now we're here and I'm done.
Sure.
So, but like you said, Christine, there's been situations where I have said no, and then I felt terrible about it because we, in some ways, have been conditioned to feel like we have to be there for relationships and friendships and to the
Yeah.
detriment of ourselves. Have you had a recent situation where you said yes when you really want to scream, no, I don't want to do that, or no, thank you?
Not not necessarily a recent situation. I will say I accidentally set myself up for not failure, but like the way the year started, how
Mhm.
last year ended and this year started, I was like, all these exciting things are happening. My birthday, the holidays, coming down to visit you. This is the year where a lot of people in my life were turning 30, so it was a big year, a lot of celebrations happening, and it all sort of seemed to come around the end of the year, and I said yes to everything because in
Uh,
my heart I genuinely wanted to say yes. I wanted to be there. I forgot to factor in the fact that where I work, Christmas time is our busiest time of the year, that I basically lived out of a suitcase for 2 months because
mhm.
I was not really home. I was at my parents' house for the holidays. I came down to visit you. I came back, and I forgot to factor in time for me to recover. And I reached a point where I had a little bit of like a breaking moment. And I realized that I crossed my own boundaries in a way,
Mm.
unknowingly. I just didn't necessarily take the time to sort of see how like the game would lay itself out over time. But it reaffirmed to me the importance of sometimes it's not only you want to say no, but you need to say no,
Mhm.
right? Because otherwise I will run myself ragged. And I'm not an extrovert. I don't thrive off of social interactions. I enjoy them. I genuinely do, but I do feel depleted. I do feel
Mhm.
like I go into it with a lot of energy and like I'll leave
Yeah.
with very low energy. There are a few instances. I have some very beautiful people in my life who we sort of just charge each other. Like
Mhm.
we can just be in a room silent and just be, and it takes nothing from either of us, and we love it.
Beautiful friendships and relationships.
They are. They really, really are.
I got a friend of mine who's similar, as you said, Christine, can be high and then very low battery. And for her birthday, I think last year or the year before, I got her, or maybe Christmas, pins that said social battery. And like it had from like green to red. And I feel like maybe that should be on a gift list for you, Christine, where you can just like at the beginning of a thing say like it starts here and then like just gently throughout the
Yeah.
event, like you can just move it to the side and then people will like, oh, okay. It's just lower
Yeah.
on the battery end and yeah.
That's really good. Because what I struggle with is when I'm at something, it's hard for me to extricate myself from a situation once
Mm.
I reach like my empty.
Yep.
Once I reach empty, I still feel like the expectation that I need to be there. I haven't seen everyone, I haven't talked to everyone, but I'm tapped out.
Hmm.
And a lot of the time I'll force myself to stay, mostly because I also don't want to miss out on anything.
You're like, oh, these two competing, needs and wants there. Don't want to miss out,
Exactly.
except for I need my to prioritize myself.
But then it's, well, am I really the best version of myself there by the
Mm.
end? Is it helping or hurting me in that situation also for those around me? If I'm like a real spore by the end of it, no one wants to be around a bore.
That makes me think the one thing my dad was really good about, and I think we've talked about this before, and I know my mom and I laugh about it, was my dad was really good at pulling what we joked is the ripcord.
Mm.
Just, pulling that ripcord, eject out of a situation. No, no guilt, no anything, just like, peace out, bye. And that happened a few times where mom and I were left in awkward situations where we didn't feel like we're uncomfortable pulling the ripcord, but he was just like, nah, I'm out of here. I'm done with this. Bye. We're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you didn't want to take us with you? So I feel like, maybe that's something that we can practice is just, even if it's as
Sure.
silly as saying, hey, I got to pull the ripcord, I'm just going, bye.
Yeah. That's funny. It's, well, what's more awkward, right? Overstaying and not wanting to be there, but still being there, or just being like, this has been fun. Bye. And like dipping. What's more awkward? Like
That's
you had an enjoyable
yeah.
experience. It ended. Let's move on.
I think
Because
it's more awkward to stay because everyone's gonna watch. Where's the
what do
conversation
we
going?
do now?
Yeah, everyone's kind of doing that weird dance of, do we leave? How do we get out of this?
Right. Exactly. But I will say a little win for me was, you know, this past weekend in particular,
hmm
one of the things I had said yes to had to be rescheduled, and it was rescheduled. And I said no, not because there's like a myriad of other things that I needed to focus on, and I just didn't have the time. Like knowing that I'd have to factor this into my day, I was like, well, I could really, I really want to take my time with the weekend for once and not
hmm
feel like I have this or this place or this place to be at by a certain time, because I needed to focus on me and my apartment and like getting unpacked and like all this stuff. I feel like I've been living out of a suitcase since the year started. So, and there was just a number of things, and it was one of the first times I didn't necessarily feel guilty. Yeah, I'm bummed I'm missing out, but I know that there'll be
hmm
another one. I know I can call that person up and be like, "Hey, I'm sorry I missed this. Would love to do something soon with you or with the group again, you know?"
And I think good friends, good people will understand that and go, yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. We'll get together another time. Take care of
yeah,
you. And if
for
they
sure.
don't, set a sign.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a sign. It's definitely, well, it'll show you how those people handle those situations.
You know what we should do? We should
Hmm.
plan a weekend where we get together, we go somewhere new, and maybe we do one of those like 24-hour reading challenges or something. Just go somewhere and just take a weekend for ourselves and just do something very
That
low
sounds really
pressure.
nice.
Don't
Yeah.
have to be anywhere. We can just, set ourselves up with some food and good books and just chill.
Yeah. That sounds really nice. I'm down.
Then if other people are like, oh, I want to do this that weekend, I'm like, sorry, no, I have
I,
plans
I have plans,
and I'm
and
out.
they are very minimal, and I am very excited. Yeah.
My favorite thing, I think we've seen this movie together, The Spy Who Dumped Me.
Yes.
I think my favorite line out of that is the blonde friend who's asked me a question about this weekend or something because the brunette, I think Mila Kunis is having to explain stuff, and she's okay. What'd you do this weekend? And her friends, I bought a boat, and I'm out. There's no explanation needed. Just I bought a boat, and I'm out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's a really good example of, I mean, despite how ridiculous it is, that you don't have to, you don't owe anyone an explanation. I don't know for me why I feel like I do.
yeah.
I'm sure that's something I can dig into in countless hours of therapy.
When you figure that one out, would you share it with the group? Because
Sure. I don't know if I will, but we'll try.
still pondering.
Yeah. This is something that's going to, I think this conversation is going to stick with me certainly for the rest of the day, probably for the rest of the week, because it's so simple, yet I don't know
Oh,
why it's so hard to.
yeah. Why are things the hardest?
Yeah, I don't know why. It should be pretty simple.
Craving more of our company? Join the fun over on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Mere Project Pod. Dive deeper into our world and engage with us on a whole new level. Don't miss out on the excitement.
So let's move on to this idea that I certainly have struggled with from time to time. I'm sure many of you have as well. It's no is not always personal.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw this out there. Why do we take no so personally
Mm.
when we're not the one saying no? Or when we're the one saying no?
Mm.
Why do we take it so personally?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. Like if you're the one throwing out plans and somebody else says no, why do we take that no personally? I don't know if it's like that people pleasing part or it's just like the immediate thought for me is like, did I do something wrong?
Right.
Or
Am
did
I
I
the
do
problem?
something to upset this friendship versus just saying, no, somebody's just stating their boundary. I
Mm-hmm.
need to get better at that.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's just really hard to kind of just let other people's things be other people's things and let our things be our own stuff and just go,
Yeah.
okay, not today, not tomorrow. We'll catch up another time. We'll plan something
Mm-hmm.
else. And somebody goes, yeah, that's fine. I just can't do it right now. Okay. But yeah, it's like to
Yeah.
me, it's that first initial gut reaction of, did I do something wrong?
Sure. Yeah, I often like immediately start to internalize it and turn inward and blame me like I'm the
Hmm.
problem. I also think sometimes like I get really excited about something, and
Hmm.
when I reach out to friends or colleagues to see if they want to join and I get a no, it's oh damn, like it's almost like I know I'm not going to have the same experience knowing that they're not going to be there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's also kind of plays into it. Yeah, I guess also sometimes this feeling of like discomfort, you're feeling disappointed, but just like how you have boundaries, you want to be respected. It's important to respect someone
Hmm.
else's. And something we mentioned in a previous episode, maybe even the last one, like we need to be more okay as a society feeling okay with feeling uncomfortable. That's just a natural feeling people feel, and it's not something that you need to immediately fix. Like
Oh, yeah.
it's important to sit and figure out how to deal with being uncomfortable or disappointed or, you know, upset.
Yeah, with those emotions that people like classically label as negative or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't
Exactly.
think they really are. I think we just, like you said, been
No.
socialized to think that way or conditioned.
Right. Right. Really, it's like we put the word negative to
Hmm.
those emotions when they're really just a genuine natural part of the human condition, right? That's a universal emotion. Every emotion a human feels, everyone goes through. So, yeah, I also think it's important to remember and learn that you shouldn't take rejection or boundary setting as a personal attack,
Hmm.
right? It's something someone's doing for themselves.
Yeah.
And you should just try not to take that personally. And maybe it will help you reevaluate and look inward and sort of have you think about, okay, wow, that's an example of someone setting a healthy boundary. What do I need to do for myself and in my life
Hmm.
to help me feel better? Like, what boundaries do I need to evaluate or set? Or I truly learn the most from other people and seeing what other people do.
Hmm.
So I've sort of gotten to a point of I don't take it personally. I take it as a learning opportunity for me, you know?
And that
So,
definitely takes, I think, skill and practice, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, of like when you feel that initial rejection to a no and not talking or saying something from a reactionary place, but really kind of taking a pause and going, oh, right, that's not about me. It's not about
mm,
what I'm asking if they want to join or do. This is not about me.
yeah,
And just kind
for
of like
sure.
putting a little break on the conversation, going, oh, yep, okay. And just say something else. Oh, bummer. Okay, let's do something another time. Or we can try, is there a date that does work for you or something like that?
And I think it's also okay to put the ball in their court a little
Hmm.
bit and say, okay, I'm trying to put time and energy into this relationship. I understand life is busy and things don't always work out,
Hmm.
but I've made the effort.
Hmm.
Leave the ball in their court to sort of come back and like a relationship is a two-way street. You never want to feel like you're putting in more effort than somebody else. But, that's a natural part of life too. Sometimes you do have to carry the load a little more than the other in some instances. But it's also a boundary, setting a boundary of, okay, I've tried. I will continue to try, but I'm going to leave it in their court for when
Hmm.
they're ready to come to me, you know? What do you think?
No, I think that's actually a really, I like that idea. And it got me thinking in terms of friendships, absolutely put the ball back in their court. And if they come back and say something, and sometimes I think we talked about it, friendships kind of like naturally fall away and fade. And the people who are meant to be there and who want to be there will be like, take that ball and go, yeah, okay, so I'm actually free this weekend or this time. And let's plan something. Does that work for you? But it got me thinking about dating, where no really does sometimes just need to be a no. And if somebody says, okay, well, if that doesn't work, can we, would this date for dinner or coffee or something ever work? And if somebody gives you a second no, that might be a really time to face it. This may be this person's not interested. Um, Again, not really personal to me, which is hard, right? Because if you're facing a dating situation of someone saying no,
Yeah.
it feels personal. I think
Yeah.
it slightly is, but it's also probably not because in the long run, you're probably better off as a person receiving the no going, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I think at face value, it definitely presents itself as something quite personal,
Hmm.
but I think it's more personal on the person who's saying no,
Yeah.
right? Because, like, I know, I think the only way you'll hopefully be successful in dating is if you genuinely show up as yourself.
Hmm.
And you're not always going to jive with people, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So I know it's hard. I know it's hard. Me, I know. But in the moments of, if it doesn't feel right for you, or if for them it's not feeling right, don't force it. No one wants to be
Right.
in a situation where you're just going to, out of obligation or whatever the case may be, like, if people aren't feeling it, then don't force it.
I think that kind of goes to we're not friends with everyone for a reason because there are people that we just, like you said, don't jive with. And why would we force a romantic relationship with somebody that we ultimately don't jive with?
Yeah.
Whether you're the person saying no, because you can realize like this person might be fun for this date, but it's really, if you're looking for something long term, not going to go somewhere, then you can say no. And
Yeah.
that's a very perfectly respectable boundary. And for the person receiving that no, can be like, hey, I appreciate they're not wasting my time. Or, yeah, man, that kind of, it sucks. It sucks to get a no. I mean, like in a job interview. I mean, any sort of situation where you get a no, like it totally sucks. It does feel like rejection, but ultimately, sometimes I think it's how we frame something of saying, okay, that's just no, not right now, or it's a hard no because something else is coming along the way. I think it is taking that,
Yeah.
like literally putting up, not pushing down that feeling of rejection or discomfort. Like, I don't think that's a healthy habit and shoving it down, saying, this is a bad emotion, don't feel it. But I think it is important to say, wow, I feel this, but put a pause on it before I say something. And how I respond is important.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think also practicing empathy is
Hmm.
crucial. How would we want others to react when we say no? Definitely that informs how we have, the only thing we have in our control in these sort of situations is how we react,
Yeah.
you know? So I certainly, like, that's at the forefront of my mind when not just these situations present themselves, but any, is I always sort of, show myself grace and lead with empathy. And, it's important to remember, like, we can't control how others feel, only how we communicate our boundaries.
Mm.
So, yeah, I definitely, those are things I try to keep in mind a lot when I am sort of contemplating where to move forward in certain situations from where I'm at. But yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, like a good reminder thing is like prioritizing our own needs is not selfish. It's necessary. So, as you said, you can continue to show up in any situation and be the best version of yourself, the best form of yourself. Because if you go to the point where you've just, I mean, totally disrespected yourself because you've just been giving your time away and you're running out of energy and you have literally nothing else to give, you're not going to show up as who you want to be. And you're also telling, I mean, depending on what you believe yourself, the universe, like, you're okay being treated that way, that you're okay letting your boundaries have be constantly run over. And I'm saying that as somebody who struggles with that, who's working on setting better boundaries and communicating them, because we can't control how other people feel. And if other people don't like our boundaries, this is really hard to accept, but that's a them problem, not a me problem.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it's
And
not my responsibility to make them feel better about that boundary.
absolutely. Absolutely. I also want to just say it's never too late to set a boundary,
Mm-hmm.
or enforce one. If you feel like something is continuously being either someone's continuously crossing one or coming right up to that line, it's important to push back and be like, this is a firm line, you know? I and you're completely within your rights to say you don't deserve for your boundaries to be disrespected.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not just for me, they're also for you. It's to clearly sort of put lines into something that is otherwise formless, you know? And to your point about selfishness, that's something that's like going down a rabbit hole for me. Like the self care versus selfishness, Like,
Mm-hmm.
where's that line? I certainly, for me, I've struggled to figure out knowing what the difference is. Like, clearly, I understand, like, there are things you need to do to take care of yourself. But sometimes it's colored in my mind where self-care is like, for me, like, selfish. Like, I see it as being selfish.
I find it very difficult being your friend to think that you would ever get to a point where you were an entirely selfish being.
Well, thank
Now,
you.
if you choose to prioritize yourself in every situation, ad infinitum for everything, then we might be having a conversation of, okay, that might be a little less self care.
Right. For
But
sure.
yeah, I think it's important to be selfish sometimes,
Mm.
seeing as you're somebody who's very unselfish, to prioritize your health, your self care. I think, Christine, you brought up a really important point of it's never too late to set a boundary or reinforce a boundary. And I think that's super important because I know I've struggled with that in friendships and relationships in the past of I haven't ever set this boundary and it feels almost too late or it's inappropriate to now set a boundary that's different than what I've allowed in the past.
Mm.
But yeah, I like what you said about it's
Yeah.
never too late. And I think that's another
Oh.
very difficult part of this conversation of it's already hard to say no.
Mm. Oh, for
And
sure.
then you feel like, can I even say no at this point because I
Mm.
haven't said no
I've
before, you know?
Right. The greatest piece of advice I've recently gotten is the reminder you are a human being and it's okay to change your mind.
Mm, love that.
You may have thought and said one thing, and now you are in a completely different situation and a point in your life, and you feel differently, and that is okay. And there will be people in your life who you will come across who will see and respect that, and some
Hmm.
people won't get it, and you can't control that.
No.
So don't take it on. Don't try and be like, don't take it personally, I guess, is the simplest way to put it. I know
Yeah.
that's easier said than done, but
Oh, so much so. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, okay, Christine, I think we've dabbled a little bit in it. But so what are some
Yes.
practice and takeaways? Like how do we plan to practice saying no going
Mm.
forward? What is your advice, your thoughts? Lay it on me because I want to know.
Well, I think the easiest place to start is by starting small, right?
Mm-hmm.
Setting small, realistic goals for saying no without needing to give a reason.
Mm.
I'll let you know when I am able to do that. But, like, some ways you can do that is just using simple, firm responses. No, I can't make it versus no, I can't because. Just no, I can't make it. Just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, practicing in low stakes situations first. Definitely I find if the stakes are low, I can definitely do something more easily. The anxiety is low then. And also, while you're practicing, preparing for pushback and
Mm,
having a response or or figuring out a way to stand your ground when you inevitably are going to be faced with pushback. So those are just a couple strategies that I was sort of thinking of when figuring out what to say.
well,
Is
kind
there
of
Go ahead.
interesting when you were saying the no, I can't make it, or instead of no because, it makes me think of a time when I was in my museum professions masters where I was doing the exhibition, the professor slash director gallery, the professor slash gallery director. That's the proper way order of things. There we go.
I mean, you had all
Not
the
director
words.
gallery. He worked very hard to train us out of giving a rationale before the answer. So if she'd asked, "Is the wall or is the intro text for the wall done?" She didn't want us to say, "Well, we're still working on it and editing it." Da, 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 da. So the answer is no.
Mm,
you know so no, and then maybe you can give a short no, it's almost done, no, we're in final editing, versus giving a whole long rationale and then your answer. So that made me think of when you were saying just no, I cannot make it. So I need to get
mm,
better at like shifting the order of how I say something is no,
yeah,
or yes, and yes, this, not because, not the whole why, just
yeah.
answer, short response.
I also have found, and I don't know if this is something I want to do for the rest of my life, but it certainly helped in the interim of coming to terms with not having to constantly give a reasoning,
Mm-hmm.
but saying unfortunately or I'm sorry to say, like, I can't
Mm.
make it. Like at least then it's conveying the fact that I wish I could, but I can't, you know?
Yeah. And that's probably more important with people that you're like, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
hey, then I really do want to be there and I can't. Versus
right.
somebody at the street of, hey, can I buy you coffee?
No.
Unfortunately, no. If you don't know them, just be like, no,
Right.
thank you.
No. Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure, for sure.
well, like use your own intuition to figure out context clues there. But I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's also talk about some situations when saying no feels harder. There's, in my mind, three big ones. Work situations
Mm-hmm.
where saying no to extra tasks. I know I can definitely feel guilty about that, but
I feel so
it,
seen.
if you're the best person to know what your workload is and what bandwidth you have, and you are completely within your right to say no, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it.
Mm.
Because if you
Mm.
say yes and you take it on, then you're just doing yourself a disservice because now you have one more thing to try and do. I know that's
Oh
something
yeah.
that I certainly struggle with, especially when in my current situation, I love my job, but it's kind of free flowing. Things kind of come up in the moment, and it's a good idea, but then I
Mm-hmm.
have to sort of realistically be like, okay, yes, but also what else do I've got going on? What other deliverables do I need to meet this week? And maybe it's a not right now sort of situation. So I know
Mm. Yeah, and
I
yeah, it's
go
difficult,
ahead.
particularly if something new comes on your plate and you love for it to be a not right now, but there is an immediate deadline on that, and you're like, crap.
Yeah, then you
Now
have
let
to
me
say
shift
no.
all my other work, which also has deadlines. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the balancing act.
Definitely. It is. And that's just life, right? It's like figuring out how to balance all of the
Mm-hmm.
plates. All
Dropping them.
right, without dropping. Sometimes you do, but
Yeah.
and that's when we need to show grace. Anyway, next, social situations. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about this quite a bit throughout this conversation. Declining invitations without feeling like a bad friend. I don't know if I'm ever not going to feel like a bad friend, but it certainly is comforting to hear you say, when I revealed the struggle I face with self care versus selfishness, like how important it is to have had you say, you're not a selfish person, Christine, because like the self-talk that the way we talk to ourselves is like probably the loudest.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not a bad friend if you can't make one gathering,
No.
or and then and then if anything, it's an opportunity for you to be like, okay, it's now I'm saying no to this, and I'm going to make a conscious effort in the future to meet up with that person one on one or say
Mm-hmm.
yes to the next thing. It's that give and take.
And I think particularly in adult friendships, that's super important. If somebody's
Mm.
really bent out of shape because you couldn't make this one thing, I think it also kind of depends on what the one thing is. If it's like a wedding or a major life event, that might be a little bit more leeway for feeling a little bit butthurt. Um,
Right. Yeah.
but if it's just a hey gathering and I wanted you to be here, like I mean, heck, our friendship has gone through a lot of waves where it's like we did connect a lot, and then there's other weeks where we played phone tag because we're
Mm-hmm.
adults and we're busy, and I think that's sometimes the hard thing is like moving, as we talked about last week or the week before, friendships as they evolve over time, and like people at different stages in their lives, and like sometimes we have responsibilities that we have to get done, so we have to turn down opportunities to hang out with friends or a social invite. And then there's other times where it's not, it has to get done today and we can kind of shift things around. So it's really, like you said, it is a balancing act. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but not feeling
Yeah.
guilty would be very nice.
Yes. Yeah, it would. All right, and the last sort of bucket I think these things fall into is family situations.
Mm-hmm.
Navigating boundaries with loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
Talked a little bit about that
Mm-hmm.
early on in the episode. Yeah, family's hard because they're some of the people who know you the most intimately, like in terms of they've known you for so long, or they've
Mm-hmm.
in some cases like they've known you your whole life. When you get to a point where you need to set boundaries for yourself, in a lot of ways that's going to be met with hopefully love and understanding, but not always. And people, family might push back on that because, to the point that you brought up earlier, it's it's okay to set boundaries even though you might have said yes or allowed things to happen prior.
Mm-hmm.
I think in particular family is one of the most unique situations because if it's a situation where a family member has known you since you were born, like they've been a full adult since you even entered the world. And so they've been able to establish what they want their life to be, but you're just figuring it out. And once you
Mm-hmm.
reach adulthood, it's within your right to set boundaries and do things differently, and that's going to be met with some criticism or
Some.
pushback. And it's important to be prepared for that pushback, right?
Right.
And have the strategies in place to stand your ground. It's so hard though with family
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
I know it's your family.
And then, no, you recently helped me think about, something, setting a boundary with a relative. And I was like, we had a whole long conversation of, is it even worth it? Is this one of those situations of you just live and let live? And like, we talked about it for a good long while and you kind of helped me like,
Yeah.
this person, it may not be worth it to have that conversation, but how else can you set that boundary, where you're not interacting or engaging as much? And that's super helpful. But like you said, the pushback, and that's kind of hard, right? With family, people that
Mm,
are meant to be around and support and love you, even if that's not always the case.
right.
Um, and if those people who are meant to be close in your life and supportive run roughshod over boundaries you're now setting, I think it says less about the person setting the boundaries and more about the other person.
Mm, mm-hmm. Mm,
So in that case, it was like we were saying earlier, like the no is not personal when you receive it. Sometimes other people's reactions to your boundaries and you saying no is not ours to take on too.
yeah.
I hope that made sense.
Oh
I think it did.
Yeah, for sure.
But, so, Christine, you have any final takeaways for our listeners? Any last words of encouragement for those, beginning their journey of telling others no?
I'll start by saying a well-placed no is an act of self-respect.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I have realized that I need to learn more about what that means for me, What else? Boundaries are necessary and healthy for a strong relationship.
Yeah.
And learning how to communicate that is important as well. And
Yeah. I agree with that. Probably more important than we think it is.
and then maybe I'll end by sort of issuing a little challenge
Oh,
for ourselves,
bring it
for
on.
us and for those listening. Let's try and say no this week to maybe one or two things
Mm-hmm.
and reflect on how it feels and sort of sit in it, If it's uncomfortable or you're feeling guilty, why? Like really try and push deep and try and understand it,
Mm-hmm.
And see where that takes you. And you can journal about it. You can call up a friend. Maybe you're going to issue this challenge to each other. Call up a friend, talk about it. I
Mm-hmm.
know I do I do way better when I try and like just talk something out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think let's see how that goes, everyone. What do we
Yeah,
say?
I like it.
Awesome. Well, that's our conversation for today. Saying no isn't always easy, but it is a skill worth practicing. Whether it's setting boundaries, prioritizing yourself, or simply not over explaining, every no is an opportunity to honor your own needs. So, next time you feel the pressure to say yes when you don't want to, remember no is a complete sentence, and you don't owe anyone an apology for respecting yourself. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you struggled with saying no? How do you navigate it in your own life? Let us know. Before we go, next time we're finally tackling a topic we've been circling since we started the Mirror Project: therapy. If we're being honest, it is intimidating, figuring out where to start, what to expect, and whether it's even the right choice. In Intro to Therapy, we'll be sharing our personal experiences, the fears we had going in, and what we've learned along the way. If therapy has ever felt overwhelming or out of reach, this one's for you. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye, guys. See you soon. Are you enjoying the banter and insights we're serving up? If so, consider tossing some support our way through our Buy Us a Coffee page. Every bit helps in fueling this passion project of ours. Find the link in our show notes or visit our link tree. We're immensely grateful for your generosity. As we wrap up, remember to hit that like, subscribe, or follow button on your preferred platform. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going. We'll catch you on the next episode.